Good evening. Last week, our discussion on rape from the perspective of leaders of Guyana's key religious denominations began with the appearance by Swami Aksharananda, a prominent Hindu teacher. On Plain Talk this evening, I have the pleasure of Maulana Abu Bakr, who was recommended to me by Sheikh Muin Haq, who was unavailable to participate in this program due to a prior commitment. Remember that this program was sparked by the outrage and anger at the gang rape of a 23-year-old woman in India, which reverberated across the world and in Guyana led to a series of letters in the press, particularly along religious lines. So on Plain Talk, I'd like to welcome you, Maulana Abu Bakr.
Thank you.
Let's start by my asking you, what does the title Maulana mean?
Maulana, it's a Persian word, and it means our servant, literally speaking. Maula means servant or someone that helps, and na is indicative of us. So it's akin to the term civil servant in English, civil servant, but in a religious context.
So how does it differ then? Because I thought it was hierarchical in terms of teaching. How does it differ from, say, mullah, mulvi, sheikh, imam, or even we can go higher, ayatollah?
Oh. Because of the Indian heritage to the Muslims in Guyana, Maulana was the original term used to describe someone of a scholarly background. You actually get the title after studying a certain amount of years and preparing yourself to serve the community in that capacity. So Maulana is akin to that. Whereas Mulvi could be the Imam, could also, it is a term of respect. Maulana is also a term of respect, but it differs in that there's a qualification, an educational
One of
background.
learning.
One of learning, yes, to the word Maulana.
Do we have the female equivalent to Maulana or any of these others that I mentioned, Sheikh, Mulvi, Mullah?
Yes,
or
of
certainly the Maulana. Do we have a female equivalent?
Well, Maulana is a title. It means it's just like a civil servant. So that could be male and female actually in terms of its translation. But the scholarly background is actually alim, which means scholar. And so to that you have the female, and there are many, alima, and just like you have the schools that I came through, you have the female or the sisters school for the sisters, and those who come out of there are also called the alima. And the gentlemen or the brothers that come out through and graduate at this level are called alims. This is the actual, the legal title, if you may, or the official title is alim, which means a scholar. And for that there, of course, the female equivalent.
Do we in the mosques and the various mosques and,
Yes.
and even the different, I think you have branches of Islam in Ghana. How many are headed, or how many have someone at your level in their organization?
I'm not sure. What do you mean by branches?
Well. I think in Alexander Village, for example,
Yes.
you have two different mosques, and I think.
Well, you have two mosques.
Yes, but
two mosques. I don't think they're different, are they? They're just two mosques. Is there something specific?
Is any of them headed by a woman?
Any of the mosques headed
Yes,
by a
yes.
woman? I doubt it. No, I don't think any mosque in Guyana is headed by a woman. No.
Why do you think that is so?
I think the Muslim community of Guyana is in its infancy. We're very new in Guyana. 100 years, 150 years. Actually, I'm a handful of people of this exposure to Islamic knowledge and the background. We were probably just within about 30. And so this trend of seeking knowledge in India or in Arabia is relatively new. And till now, mostly brothers. There are sisters who have been to Syria and so on, but they're very few, very few. And so I think the trend is now beginning to provide that level of Islamic knowledge to the community. It's just now beginning. And so probably that would explain why we don't have quite as many alimas or female scholars of Islam in Guyana at this point.
Does that bother you?
Yes, of course it does, because uh, the sister in the Muslim community, or the female, or the lady, or the alima, she has certain advantages. She's easier to approach for ladies, and for them to talk about matters that they would find certain inhibitions to address with me, or any of the brothers. And so she will be able to do more good in that field, and also in representing women in terms of their needs to the wider society, and probably to the nation even. And so there is a dire need for greater scholarship within the female sector, if you may, within the Muslim community. And that is something that we need to work on a little more. Probably also one of the issues with it is that families are not prepared to send their daughters away for 12 years, like in my case, or 10 years, or and so on, to just go and study and stay there, and be away from the home. And so that causes some other challenges. It poses different challenges. But the need does exist, and it would be a happy day when we could find so many sisters with this engagement, because the need for greater knowledge at a female level, where she will have access not just to the children and to the ladies, but to be able to provide, as a teacher, immediate guidance to the sisters of Islam. It's absolutely a need and a necessity, and I would urge the families to actually, try to do something about it.
I will be talking with the Catholic bishop next week. One of the issues among Christianity and the Catholics is all of Christ's immediate apostles were men. Was that the same with your prophet, with the Prophet Muhammad?
With the Prophet Muhammad, no, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm thinking you're talking of his companions. And
yes.
He had over 100,000 companions.
No, I'm thinking of his inner, I don't want to say kitchen cabinet or inner core, but the immediate.
Okay.
Because when he started, of course, the Prophet was a
alone.
very small organization.
Well, it started small, like everything else. He started alone, actually, but the first person to support him was a lady. The first person to comfort him and give him support, monetary support, financial support, and emotional support was his wife, Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. May God be pleased with her. And so the very first person to accept his message, to represent him, to look for support within the society in which they existed in Mecca, was actually a woman. And this continued. There's Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, who is a companion also of, the inner courts of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And she is an authority. She is an authority on Islamic jurisprudence, and held in very high esteem till today. And so much so that the second caliph, Umar, would seek her advice based on her understanding and her knowledge and her exposure to Islam on matters of state and legislature. So yes, within the religious body of Islam, from the very inception, women played not just a participatory role, but an integral role in the preservation and in the refinement and development of the Islamic legislation, so to speak. If I'm coming across clearly,
that's fine. That's fine. Yes. I can't answer for the audience, but I think you are. The issue then is there any part of Islam, any instrument, any level of the hierarchy from which women are excluded?
From the hierarchy, like the system of government or something like that.
Yes.
I don't think women are excluded per se, but for the imam to be a lady is not accepted, and there are practical reasons for that. And so I don't know and that is an international discussion right now, and in many cases to the disadvantage of the Islamic perspective, because we would like to understand better what is Islam rather than understand how Islam differs from us. Being brought up in a Western society, because Westernization is not a place. It's an ideology. It's a culture. It's a whole paradigm of life, and so too is Islam. So were you to select a certain issue and question it in isolation of the entire reality, you would actually raise more questions than you would answer. And I think the same needs to be done with Islam. That if you're going to question something, like right now in the international arena, or with interest from the international bodies and on the portrait given to Islam by the media, which has an agenda, I suppose. And we can probably get back to that. But the issue is that why can't a woman be an imam? Let her be an imam, and that's it, no questions asked. But there are practical inhibitions that would prevent a woman from leading the prayer.
Who makes that decision is practical inhibition?
Okay. Well, I think you see that response comes from a preconceived notion. And it comes from an understanding that it shouldn't be without the knowledge of why. And this is what we need to address, because the response is indicative of a deeper
But is religion
misconception.
Always a search for truth?
No.
A search for truth?
If I may I answer the
Sure,
question
absolutely.
first? It is, for instance, prayer is an obligation upon me 5 times a day. And as an imam of the Luzignan Masjid or anywhere else, I have an obligation whenever called upon to lead the community. And a woman, however, is exempt from the obligation of prayer, which is the second fundamental pillar of the 5 pillars. And she's exempt from that for a certain period of the month. And so it would not be practical to put her in a position within which she cannot function. Because not just, and so to compensate for that in Islam, women actually give more charity. They are under obligation to give a little extra of the zakat, or the institution of help for the society. And so in terms of the practicality, I think it's becoming clearer that because she's not under obligation to pray to God, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to her creator, she should not be under obligation to anyone, to lead her, to help her during that period. So the practical implications of putting her as the spiritual leader has stumbling blocks that cannot be overcome, because it is her nature, and it is God's grace upon her that He has exempted her during this period. So I think to come back to the other question.
My question is, isn't religion, all religion,
seeking truth,
all about truth?
I guess so, yes. I would like to think so. Religion is not a question as much as it is an answer, because mankind has always sought truth.
But the journey is the question.
The journey could be perfect or otherwise. But there are 2 things that's natural to mankind. One is an appreciation of perfection, and one is the quest for perfection. And anything within our notion of beauty would attract our attention, and it would have an appeal to us. And this is natural. Even if it is a square, if it is a perfect square or a perfect circle, it will have a certain appeal to you because it is perfect. So in human nature, I think there is an appreciation for perfection. And to get there, we need guidance. And so Islam provides that guidance. How to get there, how to alleviate, how to drop off the natural weaknesses that is imposed upon us, or the weaknesses that we grow within our social context, within the environment of our home. How do we shed that? How do we raise to a higher plateau of humanity, a plateau of if you may, perfection? How do we get there? We may never get there, but the journey is very enduring, and it is very revealing, and it is very comforting. And it is part of the peace of mind that you achieve in the process.
In his book Sharia, the Islamic Law, by Abdul Rahman Aidoy of the Center of Islamic Legal Studies of the University of Nigeria, the writer says that the laws of Islam are firmly based on the Sharia, whose fountainhead is the Quran and Surah, the Wahi al-Jali, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, and the Wahi al-Kafi. Now, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, take any of these countries, Egypt, all claim to be Islamic, while sects such as the Sunnis, the Shias, the Wahhabis, the Ahmadis, they assert that they are true Islam. They are true Muslims. Which country and which sect would you say faithfully represents or comes closest to practicing true Islam?
It is not my place to pass judgment. Let us make that very clear.
Yeah, but I'm asking you,
But-
just an opinion, it's not a judgment. I'm
and
calling.
I would refrain from such indulgence because I'm not qualified to make that pronouncement. But importantly, wherever I'm not familiar with the person that you have mentioned,
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with the text also. However,
You challenge the assertions, however?
I don't challenge it, but the
they
pronunciation
all
makes
claim.
it unclear.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what you said because I'm trying to translate it in my mind. And
Well, certainly the laws of Islam are firmly based on the Sharia, whose foundation
Okay.
head is the Quran and the Sharia.
okay,
I don't think you have
and
a
the
problem with
hadith,
that.
and
Yeah.
the hadith,
And hadith, yes.
and it says so,
Yes,
and the
yes.
hadith.
Yeah.
Good. So that is very clear. But I think you had said, and the surah, I think you had said. So I wasn't sure.
Yes, this is what he says.
Okay. So that I'm not clear. It's not
Okay,
very clear.
but the question is that, and as you say, you don't wish to pass judgment, but we see, and as we were talking prior
Yes.
to this program,
Yes.
it's important that we try to understand,
Yes.
and at a wider world level, in
Yes,
fact.
we do, yes.
When you have different countries, different sects, you know the Sunnis, the Shiites.
Oh yes, quite different.
And so, which one of them, which of them, are really practicing Islam as the Quran truly intended?
There is a greater question there, and the question is there really a real Muslim country? And there are countries of Muslims, but is there an Islamic country? Is there an Islamic country where absolute Islam is perfected as the society, or there is a quest for the perfection of society along Islamic lines? And one is left, in a very difficult position, because if you were to choose Pakistan, for instance, the entire heritage of Pakistan, the foundations of Pakistan, the secular nature of its government, and so many aspects of it do not entirely align itself with what would have been the Islamic way.
Well, let me give you two examples: Afghanistan under the Taliban, and Saudi Arabia.
And Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia is run by a monarchy. It is a system of kings, and the leadership is passed from king to prince to king, etc., etc. And this is not an Islamic system. So you're left. Is it a country of Muslims or is it an Islamic country? Surely it is not a country that is based on the norms of Islamic governance. It is a country that has instituted an appreciation, if you may, of Sharia. And Sharia, what is Sharia? Sharia has a foundation. It's a beautiful word.
It's a jurisprudence, right?
Not exactly. It is
A legal
it governs.
framework.
Okay, actually, it is a life paradigm,
Yes.
because it governs my life before my birth until after my death. It governs my life from the time I go to bed to the next day before I go to bed. It governs my sleep, my wake, my everything. So it lends credence, merit, guidance. There are prohibitions and the permissibilities within the body Sharia for everything I do. And so Sharia, because Sharia is not a canon of law, so to speak. It is not legislated by the king or by the Congress or by a group of lawyers or a constitutional body. It is legislated based on the Quran, as the text indicates. However, it is developed for everyday use by people of immense truth, people of immense righteousness, people who have no monetary gain in this process, people who have only scholarship and piety to offer. It was not codified by the government. It was not codified by a government. And it was the foundations, while are very strong, because and to come back to the meaning of the word Sharia, it means a path again, and a very special path. It's not a road per se or a track. These are all paths, but Sharia comes from the Arabic word of a path that leads to water. And so in the village or wherever you live, and even some places till today, there will be one source of water for the village, and everyone would go there.
But we often hear about a country seeking to adopt Sharia law.
Yes, because you hear that in the media. you hear
Well,
that.
is that just media, or is it the countries? I mean,
No,
one needs to translate, and
but
there might be things lost in translation. But
well,
there is a jurisprudence, there is a pattern of law based on Sharia.
what I would like to explain is that Sharia has been depicted in a certain image, and it evokes, for instance, the apprehensions of the tragedies of the north of Nigeria, or what is considered to be Sharia in Pakistan, and it evokes certain images, which is conducive to an agenda within a commercial media, a media that is based on a certain enterprise.
Yeah, but
But and so here's the issue. Sharia is why my intent is to actually make clear that Sharia is something wider than that. It is something more important to a Muslim than those isolated imagery that is being portrayed as Sharia. And so when you hear a country, you've even heard talk about people wanting Sharia law in America, which is preposterous to say the least. This is not a quest for a legal system. This is a quest within the heart body of the Muslim to actually live within the context of the mercy of God Almighty.
are you saying then that the conclusion you just drew and you described as ridiculous for the U.S. Would you say that of any Islamic country, one Sharia law?
For a Muslim majority, to want Sharia law is not just expected, it is what they should do. But to impose in the present situation, or to have a fear mongering that if we don't do this, or if we don't respond in a certain way, there's a fear that Sharia law would be imposed here. I think it is the fear mongering that has led to the imagery of what Sharia law is. And so Sharia law needs to be understood. What it is, what is it, where it comes from, what is the bedrock of it, what does the word mean?
Whose fault is it that there might be some misunderstanding?
Well, primarily the Muslim community, people who have the ability and have not stepped forth. But we must accept also at the same time that the media is a very powerful machinery, and it is at work. And it has an agenda.
It's powerful, it's useful, if effective. It could also be destructive, it could be self-serving.
It could be, and many times. So I think while it is a fact that more needs to be done in the representation of Islam and Muslims and the truth about it, because the imagery portrayed is usually not just distorted, but it is contradictory to the reality of what Islamic law is. For instance, there is greater protection under Sharia for the interest of non-Muslims within the Sharia context than what is being hyped as...
Even though some of them may be called hypocrites, non-believers and hypocrites, according to the Quran?
No, non-Muslims are never called hypocrites. Let's get that clear.
So who are they?
The hypocrites were a special group of people who professed Islam, but their only objective was to undermine the Islamic leadership and the Islamic State. So these were hypocrites. In effect, they were traitors. And the treachery came to the fore on several occasions. So the Quran is very specific, and we shouldn't generalize that, okay, the Quran calls us non-Muslims.
Sure.
It doesn't.
Now, I get back to the question, because it's this whole question of division of religions into sects. And I mean, if you were to take Hinduism, and there's so many branches of Hinduism, Christianity, there are so many branches. In Islam, are there branches? The Sunnis, the Shiites, the Wahhabis. I think in the Ahmadis.
Yes.
They're all branches. And they probably profess different things. They observe different ceremonial days. How does an observer, someone seeking to understand, how does he understand these divisions? As I said, the same is true of the Christian community. But how does an observer understand that in the Muslim segment of our country?
The Wahhabis are not a sect. They're an ideology within the body Muslim. The Shia, however, is a different sect as opposed to the Sunni. I'm a Sunni. Maulana Tasdiq here is a Shia, and there are some Shias in Berbice, and some a very small minority within the Muslim community. The Qadianis or the Ahmadiyyas are also a very small minority here in Ghana.
They've been outlawed in Pakistan.
They have been outlawed in Pakistan, so I'm told. I'm not familiar with the actual.
I've read that in the Pakistani press.
Yeah, no, the actual differences that we share, because there's a Maulana here who is a member of the IRO, who is an Ahmadiyya, who is an Ahmadi, who I know him as an associate. We would attend the IRO meetings together, and I have not come across any difference. So I don't know exactly what is his position or if he has different days, because I know they observe Eid together with us, and so do the Shia. So I don't think the days are different or anything. I think there's some ideas that they have that are different, but the great majority of Muslims are Sunnis, and if there is to be a preference for me, it would be the Sunni appreciation of what Islamic Sharia is.
What's your view on the Taliban in Afghanistan? You know, they believed in dismemberment, beheading, stoning, etc. And they claim that they do that within the context of the Quran.
They claim that they dismember people on
that
the
they're following the religious precepts.
Again, I must refrain. I'm not sure exactly what precepts are they talking about and what occasion the dismemberment of people here.
But you would be opposed to those?
In a general way, I should say yes, because dismembering is a very serious offense. It's very serious.
Well, it's for theft, isn't it?
The amputation of an arm or there are very clear-cut principles that governs that. For instance, if I left my phone here, a gentleman passes by, picks it up, he has stolen my phone, but I cannot amputate his hand, though I may have seen him. It does not apply like that. It is really, first of all, you see, here again, we are so limited in time and context. We need to understand what is the object of the Islamic legal system. One is that it's a deterrent. And the two is that...
But that's a serious punishment. Also.
Of course. However, Saudi Arabia, for instance, which applies Sharia law in the province of Ha'il, for instance, that we know about, there hasn't been an amputation in 40 years, which means no one has committed theft.
No one has been caught committing theft.
Well, no one has been caught and indicted on that criminal offense, because it requires so much. It has to be proven that there is premeditation. It has to be proven that there is a certain degree of group criminality involved, or this was based solely on greed, and there must be so many witnesses, etc., etc. So I'm not sure whether the stringent nature of the application of the law is implemented under the Taliban in Afghanistan. I'm not sure, or whether it is just a implementation of the literal word without the bearing of the spirit of the...
That's the next question I was going to ask you, Maulana. Whether the words of the Quran are to be regarded as absolute, literal, and textual, or are they figurative, contextual, and subject to application to the contemporary age. And before the program we talked about slavery is abolished. Would the Quranic precepts, again,
yes,
still apply in those areas?
Well, there are no slaves, and to enslave someone is prohibited in Islam. However, if you had entered into Islam, you became a Muslim, and you had certain amount.
But there were slaves at the time,
yes,
and they mentioned several times in the Quran.
Yes, so there are laws governing that. But to catch somebody, to go and catch a person and enslave them, make them a slave, is completely prohibited in Islam.
But the question is the Quran absolute, or is it contextual?
It is contextual. It may not be quite as figurative as some people want us to believe, but it is contextual, and it is absolute, and it carries.
Can
with
it be both?
Yes, it is absolute, because
contextual means I'm using it within a particular context.
Yes, it is within a particular.
Whereas textual means it's absolute and it's literal.
The Quran is a message, and the message has a purpose. And you may find, for instance, an issue being dealt with in several different places of the Holy Quran, in different verses. And so you have to put them all together. As you would know in Western law, I think you're a lawyer, is that correct?
Yes.
When the judge passes and he passes a verdict, he passes a judgment. He says, and this is read with so and so, and this case is read with so and read with. Correct? Is that correct? That's how you do it.
He bases his decisions based on precedent.
Yeah,
That's our jurisprudence. That's the system of.
But that jurisprudence, that act of having it being read with so and so, with the precedents cited, is what the Muslim judge would also do. He would quote the ayah, the verse of the Quran, and the different verse, and the other verse, and it's read with this, and it's read with this, so that the spirit is not lost in the judgment.
On Plain Talk this evening, I'm discussing with Maulana Abu Bakr of the Luzignan Mosque, the Islam and its attitude to rape. We'll now take an ad break.
No, we ain't giving up no mountain, and we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belong to we. Not the one blue saki, not one rice grain, not one for us, not a blade of grass. This land is our land now, we're gonna make it somehow.
Welcome back to Plain Talk with Maulana Abu Bakr. Religion, and again I come to all religions, they claim they're about peace, and it's all about peace and God. Then how do we explain historically the several wars and the atrocities which have been carried out in the name of religion by leaders of religion, whether Christians, Hindus, Muslims, and anyone else?
How do we explain?
Yeah.
Religion, because of its very nature, its accessibility, its beauty, becomes an easy pawn for the politician and the person wishing to expand his arena of authority. And also, when you have people in positions of authority and power, absolute power, it is easy then to be an aggressor or to have fantasies of great dominion. And because religion is an easy access also to the sentiments of the heart of the masses, it becomes an instrument by which most of the masses can be easily exploited in very quickly, like we have seen in history. But it doesn't mean that religion is an advocate of war.
But all religions, they've waged some very brutal, sustained, damaging, almost genocide.
Not religion. People.
What in the name of religion?
In the name of religion. That is the distinction we need to make and understand. Like the wars, whether it was the invasion of Iraq, first, second, or the bombing, or World War I, World War II, World War III. This is not about religion. And though you may have seen it in history, it is a clearer manifestation of the greed of man to dominate another. And they would do so, whether it is in the name of westernization, whether it is in the name of my race or democracy, whether it is in the name of weapons of mass destruction, whatever excuse people can find, leaders find, they have used it, truthfully or deceitfully, with compunction, without compunction, they have. And religion is an innocent victim here, just as much as every other ideology that stands for peace is sacrificed at this altar.
But Islam itself
Yes.
was born in an environment of war. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct.
In the days of the Prophet, he himself was engaged and was the target of war. Is that correct?
It was a difficult situation because of the nature and culture of the people. And after the establishment of the Islamic State, there were several acts of aggression that had to be deterred and had to be, and so the engagement of, but that did not form the basis of the foundation. Islam was not formed out of that situation. Islam was formed under the concept of da'wah.
No, and yeah, I'm putting it within the context with there.
Yeah.
Now, but you're picturing Islam there as being defensive and protecting itself. Is there not evidence that Islam itself has carried out wars like Christians and Hindus against other religions and against people?
There are evidence of Muslims being the aggressors time and again, just like anyone else. And this does not validate their claim. It does not lend credence to it from the Islamic perspective. And it does not make it any greater a right because they were Muslims that they did this or they did that, or the invasion of Rome or of Romania or Ukraine or whatever, wherever it has happened. But the fact remains that Islam itself, if you were to abide by the laws of Islam, if you were to live as a Muslim, this would not have been the case. And so it comes back to that very important issue of greed in people and aggression that hasn't been conquered. And in order to fill it, people choose to conquer lands rather than conquer their own selves.
Now, all the discussions I've had, including on this question of rape, with a diverse group of people, suggest that rape is an issue of, among other things, gender violence, power, and control. Do you share that?
Absolutely. It is a crime. It is a terrible sin and a crime.
Now, a leader of the Muslim community who was part of the public debate on rape identified the way a woman dressed as a causal factor. Do you agree?
Causal factor. It's, whether a woman or what she wears determines
whether she is encouraging rape.
We must be very careful. We must be very careful in what we say, because we are living a beautiful reality, and what we say would be carried probably for generations. And if there is any area for misinterpretation of what is being said, or it leads to an engagement that deviates from the objective of that discussion, which it was initially. For instance, I think the discussion began with the protection of women in society, and it ended up in a very brutal exchange, if you may, about the dress and the Islamic way of life and the Quran, and questioning so many, wrongfully questioning so many things.
Part of this program is to correct and to remove.
Well, I hope we are able to achieve that in the very small.
So this is why I'm asking you whether you subscribe, as a Maulana, you subscribe to the belief that a woman's dress is a causal factor in her being raped.
Let me say this. Would one distinguish between a woman who is poorly clad and one who is clad from head to toe? Clearly there's a distinction there. But none of them, neither of them, should be held accountable or giving charge of encouraging a crime upon themselves or upon society. It should not. We have to be very careful about this, because if you are going to blame a woman that she was the fault that I hurt her, we have to be very careful about that. That is not so. A woman, I don't think a woman should be held accountable at all for being raped.
You see the woman entirely as the victim here.
Well, yes, entirely she is the victim. There may be, and psychologically there could be some incentive, something to the very twisted and perverted in mind. Okay, he saw something and it incited him or whatever. But she is not accountable. She is not held accountable for the crime perpetrated against her by a twisted individual. I want to make that very clear, and in Islam it's very clear.
Is that the view of all Muslims, you think?
This is the view of Islamic jurisprudence. I'm simply giving it word in English. It falls under several categories. Rape falls under several categories of the criminal justice system, of the civil system of law in Islam as well.
The question of women and men and their relative rights and responsibilities in Islam, why do countries which claim Islam as their guiding principle, now they're not claiming to be Islamic State, not allow women the same freedoms as men? Because we're talking, I'm putting this in the context of rape,
yes,
and because we said we all agree, power, how society is structured, men, women. Why aren't women treated equally with men in these countries that claim to be following Islamic principles?
I don't think it is really these countries that claim, but it is a world heritage of the East where the patriarch, the man of society, has certain advantages in those societies. And this has nothing to do with religion. The society could be Christian, it could be Buddhist, it could be Hindu.
Now, 434, I think it's surah you call it, is the correct word, right? Surah?
Yeah, okay.
Men are made responsible for women, and God has endowed them with certain qualities and made them the bread earners. The surah adds that religious women will cheerfully accept the arrangement, but if there is rebellion from the women, the punishment open to the man includes admonishment, use of negative incentives, and as a last resort, beating them. Again, I come back to this business. First of all, the whole power structure, men versus women, in the Quran. And should this be taken literally, that men are permitted to beat women
There
in
is
Islam?
a permissibility. There is, and I will not deny that, and I will not make excuses for it. There is a permissibility in the Holy Quran. And it is governed by, if you see the verse says, فَإِذَا خِفْتُمْ, and I'll quote you in Arabic, نُشُوزَهُنَّ فَعِضُوهُنَّ وَهْجُرُوهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ. So there are four, فَإِذَا خِفْتُمْ مِنْ نُشُوزَهُنَّ فَعِضُوهُنَّ وَهْجُرُوهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ. So there are four phases that has to precede this act.
This is why I said as a last resort.
Yes. It is not just a last resort. The resort itself has boundaries, and it has limitations. And it is there, remember, part of the Islamic legal system, the code of law, is to provide a deterrent that women should not, and men should not, and this should not, and that people should not kill, you should not rob, you should not, because the punishment is so severe, and the potential of you falling out of the grace of God Almighty is so strong, and so on and so on. So part of the law. So I doubt whether, now, according to this verse, if a man reaches the point where after he has refused to sleep with his wife and he has separated from her in the bed and she hasn't changed, she continues to be disobedient, he is only allowed to strike her in the palm of her hand with something no longer than 6 inches. And
is that actually in the Quran itself?
This is the interpretation in the hadith.
As in interpretation.
This is the interpretation, that it's a miswak, which is a toothbrush. He can only beat her with a toothbrush in her hand, and it cannot be a blow that leaves a mark. Now, but the ayah, the verse, is there as a deterrent that it must never reach this point. However, if it reaches this point, this is where.
But the question is this question of relative power, because we are talking about. Does a woman who is offended by her husband have the same right in Islam?
Oh, she could have him flogged. So yes, she has equal and more right, because in the Holy Quran, and you know, I would like to have the opportunity to really expound.
I realize that, but we don't have the time.
We don't have the time, because, and as a matter of fact, if a woman is hurt at home, she has the right, she has the recourse to actually, in civil courts of Islam, to get compensation from her husband and for him to pay a diya, which is to ransom back his freedom from her, because of the hurt he has inflicted, and if you can prove even emotional hurt or mental torture. And so the ayah in the Quran, which is called a verse of the Holy Quran, which really means an evidence of the wisdom of God Almighty, is there as a deterrent. It is not there for a man to put it into practice. It is only there. It is not figurative. It is there, and it is bound by regulations.
Is that practiced in Guyana, as far as you know?
It is not practiced anywhere in the world, my dear brother. Mr. Christopher Ram, it is not practiced anywhere in the world. Legally, that is.
It's not permissible now? You say?
No, it is absolutely permissible. But any God-fearing person will not allow the relationship with his wife to deteriorate to such a level.
It happens.
No, it doesn't happen. What happens is there's a breakdown and there's domestic violence. This is not about that. This is not a license to beat your wife. This is a warning more to her than an opportunity to him. Let us understand it within the context. And no person is allowed to inflict a person with a. You can't flog a person out of your own. Even you can't do that. It is not to flog an animal is not permissible. So when it says they're beat, it doesn't mean flogging. I want to make that very clear. It's a very specific issue.
In a world where human rights, new concepts of development are taking place, if there's a clash between a religious precept and a human right,
as seen by
by
conventional
international
wisdom.
conventions,
Yes.
which takes precedence for you?
For me, the faith. The faith always takes precedence.
So you would support if it got to this, the beating even by your whatever the standard is, you would support.
Whether I would not support anyone to do that. I think he has three recourses. First.
No, assuming that has been done, assuming the recourses have been resorted to.
No, I would not allow if someone came to me saying that I have done this and I have done this and I have done this and I've found and it's only left for me to beat her, I will not allow him to do so. I will, though he may have license to do so, though it is mentioned there and he may have license to do so, I will not allow him, because one of the objects is for there to be, and if you read the next three verses onwards, what it says that if there's a breakdown, you should find a group of people from his side,
the independent people,
and yes, and to arbitrate. It should not reach this level. This is an absolute difficult situation.
Maulana, how is rape or its equivalent term treated in the Quran or the Hadith?
As a crime, as a terrible crime.
How is it? How many times? My understanding,
Yes.
very very limited, is that rape is not referred to in the Quran. Is that correct?
Rape is not referred to in the Quran.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't have a...
certainly among Muslims, a Muslim man, and as to with whom sex is permitted.
I'm not sure I understand you.
Well,
Rape is a crime in Islam. It is a terrible crime. As a matter of fact, a lady, there are few books of Islamic traditions that are really authentic. Some there are fundamental 6. And of that 6, there are a handful of people in Guyana who have the permission, the certification to actually, I happen to be one of them. And in those books, for instance, in Bukhari Sharif, which is the first, and Abu Dawud, a woman actually claimed rape against a man in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. She came to him and she said so and so. And the man immediately was punished he was executed.
Now, some writers have interpreted 424, Surah 424, and 3350
Okay, I'm not that good at math.
as permitting non-consensual sex. Is that a fair representation?
No, it is not. It is a completely erroneous representation. Non-consensual? No. How could that is rape? That is just another word for rape. No, you're not. Even a husband is not allowed to rape his wife. He cannot have non-consensual sex with his wife. And this is governed by all four of the school of thoughts of jurisprudence of Islam. And she could actually have him charged with non-consensual sex. And while some people argue that because she's married to him, so and so, but it is the hurt that has to be compensated. And it is under the Islamic laws, there's something called jaraha, which means wounding. And if someone is wounded on the hand, the penalty is different and the compensation is different, and similarly for different parts of the body. And so it's the hurt and the wounding that has to be compensated for. So Islam is, in the Sharia, it is very clear, if I may. And this is not the position, really.
Rape, as you know, has a definition that includes statutory rape. I certainly in Ghana, and as you said, it applies elsewhere. Now, Imam Muhammad Qasim Ali of the Husseini Islamic Center in Petersburg, he was approached by a minor's parents who had gone to him for advice on their underage daughter, and he said to them, they wanted to know whether it was permissible. He said to them, and this is the quote.
What was permissible?
This underage child, under English law, she lives in Petersburg in England. He said, if the marriage was not possible, I would have told you straight away. I would love the girl to go to her husband's house as soon as possible, the younger the better.
I don't know who he is. What are the reference?
A young child comes to you. She's under 60. She's under the statutory, the age of statutory rape in Ghana, and seeks your guidance. What do you say?
If she seeks my guidance on marriage,
yes,
she would like to get married to
the parents of a child.
We are living in Guyana. We are bound by the laws of this country. And so is every other person. And it is only proper that you abide by these laws. Islam does not impose marriage before the age of 16. It does not impose marriage on anyone. And so, if the country...
Islam does not impose the age of 16? Or
Islam does not impose marriage at a specific age. It does not.
So it has no age as far as marriage is concerned?
No. And so no one should. And if we are in a society where, I don't know under what references or the imam or this gentleman made, or what were the source of his wisdom, but it is not possible for you to say that the younger the better. I don't know what is he talking about really. So you are bound by the law. You are bound. The country does not permit it. You are not allowed to rebel against it. You're not allowed to, because there is no stipulated age in Islam for marriage. That a person must be married.
So does this mean you could have a child of 8 years, 12 years old getting married?
No, it doesn't mean that. What it means is, like how you have 16. In Islam, the permissibility for marriage, for the consummation of marriage, would be puberty. It is not an age. It is an experience.
Which could be around what age?
Well, I don't know. It could be different.
13?
I don't. But the age of maturity and obligation in Islam is 15. For instance, one must observe the prayers and legally, or the fasting from the age of 15. And if they have wealth and whether or not they have come to puberty, or whether or not they want to make it public, and so you can measure it against the age of 15.
One of the popular conceptions, criticisms, mention of Islam in terms of the relationship between men and women,
yes,
is this view that a man is permitted as many as 4 wives, a right not available. It is permitted 4 spouses, a right not available to women. Is that correct? Even under any condition?
I don't think it's under any condition, but there are conditionalities that governs multiple marriages in Islam.
For men only, or for women as well?
To have simultaneously more than one spouse. For a woman, no, it's not permissible.
So that's not fair treatment, is it?
I don't think so. I think that is very fair, because while men and women are equal, men and women are very different creatures. And in the divine wisdom, those distinctions are very clear. And just like the permissibility for imamat, to be an imam, is there for men, it's not there for women, and there are practical reasons for that. Just so, there are also practical implications that cannot be overcome in a rational way for women in this matter as well.
But that would be bigamy in Guyana law.
That would be.
So you would oppose it in Ghana?
Absolutely.
We've got just a few minutes. The U.S. President Barack Obama recently described gays, lesbians, bisexual, as an issue of civil and human rights. Now, the Constitution of Ghana, as you know, guarantees non-discrimination to all. Should gays and lesbians be treated in law and in practice any differently from anybody else?
Should they be treated any differently?
Should they be discriminated against?
Oh, absolutely not.
Absolutely
not. Absolutely not. No. You see, Allahu Akbar. The Holy Prophet was in a situation where he was a minority at one point, and in Mecca, which is the birthplace of Islam. And he said the revelation came that for you your way and for me mine. You have your choices. I have mine.
So is it permissible then?
Is it permissible?
Under that a choice of lifestyle, if I choose to have
homosexuality is a sin. Homosexuality is a sin in Islam. It is a sin, an abomination. It's not something that should be tolerated by society.
So it's not permitted.
It is not permitted. But whether someone has the right to do that, or I have the right to do something to them. We're living here. My neighbor might be in Ghana, for all you know, may be a homosexual. Or even if it turns out that my neighbor is a and it is public knowledge, it is not my place to do anything to them. And it is not my right either. And similarly, it is not their right to impose their lifestyle upon me. Because Islam is just in that way that while we respect a person's choice, we don't expect the fact that one is not allowed to impose his way on another person.
Would you welcome a gay person in your mosque? Will you do?
Yes, to reform him, of course. It is not permissible for a Muslim to be a homosexual. That is a sin. It is an absolute
But assume one does.
Yes.
One does and comes to your mosque and wants to continue his lifestyle because it's a lifestyle.
I will try my best to fix him.
But you wouldn't chase him out your mosque?
No. But the community would look at him with a certain degree of reproach, and I cannot blame them for that. But it is not that, okay, he's a lesser human being. And so he needs help, and help should be provided.
Let me ask you the final question. In your view, should the Muslim community be willing to work along with Hindus, Christians, Baha'is, and other communities to fight social ills, including rape, in the light of the prohibition that believers should not take Jews and Christians for their allies?
No, the Quran, it doesn't say so. It said you should not give preference. لا تتخذ اليهود أولياء من دون المؤمنين. Don't take them, don't give non-Muslim preference who don't understand what you stand for over those who understand what you stand for. So it is a natural preference that is given there based on the cultural and belief system that you share. But should you work together
yes,
with
that's the question.
And so yes, of course.
And
the Muslims have, and the Prophet himself actually, he would take the help and the assistance of non-Muslims during his time, in a time of need. And so the precedent is there, and the absence of prohibition is also there.
Maulana Abu Bakr, thank you very much for appearing on Play Dog this evening. I'm sorry we didn't get to talk about over fasting, but we'll do that another time.
Another time, hopefully.
On Play Dog this evening, I was discussing with Maulana Abu Bakr of the Luzignan Masjid the issue of Islam and rape. Next week, I'll have the Bishop Francis of the Roman Catholic Church. Until then, have a great week.